It's the I Hardly Know Her podcast, where we activate the improv power of yes and into our conversations to spark curiosity and expand our perspectives in life. Listen in as we chat with industry leaders who share their stories and skills to help inform and inspire so we can all be better individuals contributing to a better world. And remember, you don't have to be a big deal to do big things. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the I Hardly Know Her podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest because I've actually known him for quite a while, and we met through Comedy Land many, many years ago, back when I had the Idaho Laugh Fest running. And I really have been wanting to bring Greg on because he does similar types of vibes of work that I do, which is bringing in joy, laughter, like the emotional intelligence that we get from the space of comedy and humor into the workplace. And it is something that is so important. And so bringing him into the conversation today to share some of his insights, I'm just really excited to kind of have things come full circle, because not every comedian learns how to take it into a place to make the world a better place. But a brief intro. Greg is a TEDx keynote speaker, a trainer, and a coach who helps organizations reduce stress, boost productivity, and foster a mental health mindfulness culture with his WorkHappy formula. The power of laughter keynote will inspire and empower your workforce by prioritizing people over profits. Organizations with happy employees are 18% more productive. We need more productivity, folks. I love it when the numbers don't lie. And I just know that it feels better to feel better. So the proof is there too. You'll also have reduced turnover and have increase in revenue. So he worked out this WorkHappy formula during a 27-year sales and leadership career with such organizations as Nike, the Vancouver Canucks, the Vancouver Whitecaps, Business Objects, SAP, and BuildDirect. You can read the rest of his full bio in the notes. And I'm just really excited to have Greg Kettner here with us from WorkHappy. Welcome to the show.
Great, Megan. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to obviously reconnect after, like we said, back in the comedy days, and now we're both helping people use humor, obviously appropriate and HR approved. It is 2023, but just how we can be better, more productive, more creative, reduce turnover, and the big thing is better mental health.
Yeah, I love it. And we're going to touch on all these yummy things. I have a couple of notes here that I want to make sure that we touch on. And I want to start with, like, do you remember there being a certain point, like a situation you were in or a work environment where it was just so obvious to you what was lacking as far as this like really yummy human connection that we get through laughter? Do you remember what that kind of blossoming moment was for yourself?
Yeah, I think there's been several over my career, from working really good jobs with good managers, working great jobs with bad managers, and working bad jobs with good managers, right? It's kind of been a combination, but I was in a software company at SAP, and I just had a manager that just was not a personable kind of guy. And I just remember going in every day and just like, oh, okay, I got to make another 50 calls. And it was micromanaged and everything. And then I had an epiphany. We had a company event. It was a sales kickoff every year down in Vegas. There's 4,000 people. And the biggest event of the year for the company was the awards banquet, where the number one salesperson got a brand new Porsche. The house band was Lenny Kravitz. Like, it was a big deal.
Whoa.
And the comedian that they had hired, who I'd worked with before, I don't know, was just having a bad day or took the wrong substances before he went on stage, or what it was. But 7 minutes into this 3-hour program, they cut off the microphone and he was done 7 minutes in. And 10 minutes later, over the PA, they said, "Hey, we're sorry for what happened. We're going to restart the program in 15 minutes. And if anyone knows where Greg Kettner is, we need to talk to him." At which point I froze and thought, who was I talking to, and how many Heinekens did I have last night? But they had heard me do stand-up comedy in Vancouver at our Christmas party earlier, and they thought I was the next great thing. And, oh, well, Greg can do it. He can get up and do 15 minutes. So I went backstage and talked to them, and they threw me up on stage, and I had about 10 minutes to prepare. I couldn't remember any of my jokes, but I got up there and I just was honest and real. I walked out on stage. I had no idea what I was going to say, right? 4,000 people. The biggest crowd I'd been in front of was 50 before this. And I walked out and said, "Hey, I'm Greg Kettner, and I can't do any worse than the last guy."
Oh my gosh.
And so I did my 15 minutes. And at the end, that year for President's Club, if you sold enough money or enough product, you got to go on a $10,000 cruise through Turkey, Italy, and Greece. I was nowhere near getting on the boat that year. And so I just asked a simple question. I was in sales. I said, "You know what? I didn't hit my number. I'm really sorry, but I'm kind of helping out the company tonight. Can I get on the boat?" And this gentleman from one of the front tables stood up, came and shook my hand. He goes, "Kid, you're on the boat." And I still have a microphone on, right? I'm like, "That's awesome. I made it. I'm in club." So standing ovation, and then I leaned back down. I'm like, "Who are you?" He's like, "Oh, I'm the president of SAP." I'm like, "Oh, good to know."
Oh my gosh.
And that was the epiphany where I thought, you know what? I'm good at what I do. I can make people laugh. I can make people happy. I think I can make money at this. And
Yeah.
so in evolution, I quit my job 6 months later and started doing stand-up comedy for full time for about 6 years. And that's the time when we met. But it took me 6 years to figure out that I liked money more than stand-up comedy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know what the business is like, right? When you get to be headliner, it's I made $250 tonight.
Right.
And so I did that for 6 years. And then while doing that, I ran into an old friend from college. We started dating. We got married. And, when you have a new family, you can't be on the road 200
Right.
nights. And, the salary wasn't going to cut it. And I lost my job during COVID. I was working at the chamber here, and the boss said, "We eliminated your position because you're no longer essential." And I said, "I think you're no longer essential."
Oh my gosh. It's such a great story. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're already going down, go down in flames.
Right. Oh my gosh. Seriously. I love that. Well, I love that story. I love hearing it. Gives me chills to think about that whole scenario. So you were already doing stand-up obviously at the time before you were there to save the day. How long had you been doing stand-up prior to that event?
Probably about a year and a half. I had a good 20-minute set, but it
Nice.
wasn't clean. It wasn't HR approved. So all of a sudden, and I just started talking and making fun of myself on stage about how we were in Vegas, and I, blew my whole commission check on a t-shirt and just stupid, silly stuff.
Yeah.
But the lesson I learned that night was say yes, even though you don't know what to do. Right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. And I guess that was impromptu comedy that I'd never done before.
Yeah.
I've got a sold out show in Vegas. I'm never going to get here again. Let's go do it. And so I figured out how to do it after I said, "Yeah, I'm game. Let's go."
That's amazing. And it's really a testament to of like trusting yourself and just like really cool opportunity that you got to step up. And boy, what a shame they didn't just hire you to begin with. But like that story in general is like, wow. But okay, there's like so many thoughts going through my head here because I know when I was working in corporate and starting comedy on the side, it was like just this fun outlet for me. And I was starting a family at the time. I was already married by the time I started comedy. And yeah, trying to figure out like, okay, this thing I really love, like giving the gift of laughter, and sometimes like the cringy moments while we're trying to figure out like what our style is, right? How do we want to do comedy? And then figuring out, like, I remember really early on feeling very strongly compelled that people who were not actively seeking out comedy, so people at the corporate functions or people at just like day-to-day work, they were the ones who really maybe needed it the most, like the reminder of the humor and those sparks of joy. So okay, so take us a little bit. I know in one of the things that you've shared is like in our past conversations, and even I think on an intake form or something, that I was like trying to think of, like, when you were really starting out and thinking, how do I want to frame this? You lean into starting with service. Like, how do you serve others with what you do. Talk to us about like, what does that really mean to you in building your business? How did you treat it as like a service first for what you're giving to your audience in order to make it a viable business strategy?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And just to follow up, when I lost my job, my wife, she's amazing, and you women are so much better at emotional intelligence, because when I got off the phone, I went and told her, and I wanted to rip this guy new on Facebook, or letter to the editor of the newspaper and that kind of stuff. And she said, "You know
Uh-huh.
what? It's going to be okay, Greg. Why don't you take the rest of the day off and just go golfing?" Because she knows that's my stress relief, right? That's what I do for my mental health. And then later that week, we were just talking. She said, "If you could do anything, what would you want to do to make a living?" I said, "I would love to go back and do stand up, but I love my family and it doesn't pay enough." And
Mhm.
then she came up, she said, "Well, why don't you go help other people work happy? You're always Mr. Positive. You can make anybody laugh."
Mm.
And she coined the term work happy. And that's
Wow.
how I started. And so I just started researching, how do I go and help other people? And in my former life, when I was, a manager and a sales guy, I worked for sports teams. I'm a huge hockey fan. And so I thought, you know what, I can take this work happy. I can go back, talk to lingo, talk to these sales guys and girls on
Yeah.
how to be happy, right? Because I was starting to research, and people who work happy are up to 18% more productive. Salespeople, happy salespeople who enjoy going to work, are full of life, sell 37% more than
Mm.
somebody into their job. And so I started reaching out to these organizations, but the pushback was, we don't have a budget for it. The
Yeah.
timing, we're going into the season or coming into the playoffs, or it's summer and people are taking. So I just started,
Mhm.
or I continued just to reach out, and I found a sweet spot in SaaS organizations.
Mhm.
Sales is our software as a sales.
Uh-huh.
Um, they have a budget for it. They're very high stressed, and there wasn't a lot of red tape, right? I could talk to the HR person and go, "Yes, we need you. This is exactly what we need." And so
Huh.
I just started developing and building, but with service in mind, right? Because it's not about me; it's the message,
Yeah.
right? And I just happen to be the guy that's delivering it. But service is so key, right? Because I'll talk to
Mhm.
anybody, but I'm not for everybody. They may not like how I look or how I sound, but and coming out of COVID, like, we've all gone through the ringer. You've gone through the ringer,
Uh,
through the ringer. Everybody listening has gone through the ringer the last 3 years, and it's not rocket science, but it's
yeah.
just reminders and tools on how do we have a work happy mindset when we go into work. And just because I say I'm happy today, I mean, it could go sideways this afternoon,
Yeah.
but if
Oh
it
my
does,
god.
I know how to get back on track, right? I'll do my breathing exercises. I'll do
Yep.
my meditation. I'll do some reading or listen to a podcast, or call a friend like you, right? You're one of those
Mhm.
people I could call up and you would take my call, and I could
Mhm.
go, "Megan, I'm having a tough day,"
Yeah.
right? And letting that out and talking to someone else really helps our mindset.
Oh, totally. And it's so interesting how much it comes back to that. Like, especially over the years when I've been like trying to find the balance of what I want to do, listening to what like professionals do and like all the different books I've read, and it always comes back to like the most successful people when I follow them and learn more about what they do. It really is the mindfulness, mindset strategies, breathing, like some of those seemingly basic things, and yet they're an extremely challenging thing for so many people still.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. When
Yeah.
you are in the room, so like how often is it people that like, do they know what they're getting into for the day? Or is it just like groups that know that they just are assigned to go to a training? How are those rooms generally prepped for you? And like, what's the reception for people who are coming into your space?
Yeah. I've never had anybody like, wow, that was not worth our time, which is a good thing.
Oh,
Um,
good. Yeah.
but usually when I talk to, either it's, the CEO or HR or a sales manager, they're saying, their numbers are down. People aren't happy. Sick
Mhm.
time, people are calling in. I can't come to work. I'm overwhelmed. And I think I have the advantage. I think you have the same advantage too, right? We're from the comedy world. You're more improv. I'm more stand-up.
Mhm.
But we have the ability to bring levity, right? And
Yeah.
when we laugh as humans, the dopamine is released, which is, it's legal, number one. And number two, it's free, right? I mean, I tell people this. I did some research I was reading. If we laugh for 15 minutes, we burn 15 calories. And then I kept on reading. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And I kept on reading, and it said, if you have sex, it burns like 40 or 50 calories. And so I'm a practical guy, and I tried combining the two. Um, and the numbers were amazing. I burned like 4,000 calories because I was being chased. But I mean, that's a little bit edgy, but even that can go into the program, because if you make people laugh, if it's clean, I mean, everybody likes to laugh, everybody likes to have sex, I think.
Right.
Just bringing the levity into a hard subject. And I talk a lot about mental health from what our family went through, and sometimes I make it through, and sometimes I cry. And it's amazing. People afterwards will say, that was so appropriate. I've lost somebody, either through a death or a suicide. But when we can laugh, it takes away the pain for that moment. It
Yeah.
doesn't go away for a long time, but in that moment. And I could tell you story upon story of people who have used laughter to get through it. And even our family, at one point, we sat down and watched Brian Regan because we were sitting around the table and we were all crying because Rachel lost her dad to suicide.
Oh,
And I said, hey, time out. That's my go-to, right? Is laughter and humor.
yeah.
And we're all big fans of Brian Regan. And so we're having dinner, 5 minutes in, we're all crying. I said, time out. We're going to go sit on the couch. We put on Brian Regan, and within 10 minutes, we were laughing. It had taken our mind off the situation, and it turned around. It didn't take away the pain. The pain is still there, but it gives us a moment where we can like breathe again and going, okay, life is good. We can make it through this. We can do it. We're a family. And that's what, I have that advantage that I can talk about the seriousness, but, I can bring humor and laughter into it.
It's so vital. I mean, yeah, exactly what you said. It doesn't take away that pain. It helps us to navigate it, though. I mean,
Absolutely.
some people, I don't think realize until they ask more questions. I guess as when I talk to people about comedy and being in the comedy space, I didn't actually realize at the time especially when I got into stand up, because I had started improv several years prior to actually starting stand up, and the energy shift between improv land and stand up land, I was like, oh, there's a darkness here, the self-deprecation, and I was drawn to it, and I didn't understand why, but there's not that I'm unpacking like a therapy session, but I did remember thinking, oh, these people are so brave and bold because we were taking those difficult things and talking about them. At the time, I was going through some hard things that I was not comfortable talking about yet. And yet I still understood what was going on. And so I love to share with people like what's really kind of going on behind the scenes. And that's why this is so important. Okay, so you mentioned sometimes, not making it through without crying. I'm a huge crier when it comes to
Awesome.
presenting, but I would suspect that you, as a man, crying gives a special amount of permission to folks who don't normally feel like they're allowed to even cry. So I mean, does that come up? Do you have guys afterward that are kind of leaning and whispering a little something that like maybe they haven't ever shared with someone, or like the freedom that you're kind of giving them to go, oh, vulnerability does not mean weakness. It means connection and processing. So I really want to talk about that if we can for a bit.
No, absolutely. I hope I don't cry, but if I do, forgive me.
Yeah.
But no, it totally does. And, just the quick backstory on how I got into talking about mental health is my daughter lost her dad to suicide 5 years ago, and it was hell. Becky woke me up, it was 2:18 in the morning, Monday morning, said, we need to talk. And I'm like, what's going on? And she said, Grant's gone. And I didn't know what to do. I was in shock. I'm like, and so we talked and obviously we didn't go back to sleep. So we went out on the couch and talked about it, and we cried and we held each other and we just started Googling, how do you tell a 13-year-old that her dad is gone? suicide. And from that, I went to therapy on my own because I was a brand new stepdad for a year. Rachel went to therapy, Becky and her went to therapy, and then all three of us went to therapy as a family because I'm like, I don't know how to navigate this. And so when I share that on stage, time and time again, I mean, depending on the size of the crowd, but people will line up and just want to they say, thank you for sharing, thank you for being vulnerable. And they'll tell me their stories. And one of the sad but coolest stories, I was speaking at an event for an organization up in the Seattle area. And I shared the story, and afterwards, this kid came up to me and said, hey, do you have 5 minutes to talk? I said, absolutely. And he said, thank you for sharing. And he started to cry. I'm like, hey, that's cool. And so we just stood there, and he said, my sister took her life 6 months ago. And I feel so guilty because I was with her that night. We went to a movie, we went for dinner, and then I have that, guilt. And I said, I hear you. I've had that guilt as well too, right? Like you talk to people and all of a sudden they're gone. Like what? And it's not our fault, right? When people in that dark place in their life, they have a plan, and they proceed with the plan, and it's nothing that we could have said or could have done, because we always hear, right? Oh, those were the last people we would have thought about, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just amazing the conversations I've had with people. And so I told this kid, I said, you know what? It's not your fault. I've been there, done that. How can I help? And he's like, well, I went and tried therapy, but it didn't work. And I said, oh, okay. Well, tell me more about that. And he goes, well, I went once and I didn't like the person, and I'm never going back again. Can I give you some insights? And he said, sure. And I go, you know what? I'm 51. I've got a lot of shit going on. And one therapy session isn't going to fix everything, right? I go once a month, and sometimes I don't need it, or I don't feel like I need it. And, I said, you know what? Try going, try it again. I would encourage you to do that. Maybe talk to another guy, or maybe talk to a woman, whatever, right? Try and find somebody. And by the end of it, he goes, all right, I'm going to go back. And I found out from the leader of this organization that after that talk, he told me that in 21 years, he has never had anybody come to him really and say, hey, I need help. Because every company has an EAP, and you can get free counseling. And he said, after that talk, I've had 5 people come into my office and say, I need help. How do I get counseling?
Wow.
And that's the biggest compliment I've ever had in 3 years, right?
Wow.
I'm not the guy to talk to about counseling, right? I'm not a professional. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a doctor or anything.
Right.
I'm just a guy. And my buddy the other day, Jeff McLaughlin, he goes, you know what, Kettner? He goes, you're a can opener.
Ooh.
What do you mean a can opener? And he goes, every time you talk to somebody, people feel safe and they trust you and they will share with you. And that's my job. I guess I'm a professional can opener. But
I love that.
That's what makes me happy, and that's what gives me so much joy, is when people going, you know what? Hey, if a skinny John Goodman can go to therapy, I
love it.
It's either skinny John Goodman or Prince Harry let himself go. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Oh, it's so good.
We both go to therapy, right? And as guys, we're like, we don't need to talk about it. Suck it up. Guys don't cry. That is so antiquated. And the conversations I've had and the tears I've had with other men is just absolutely amazing. And these guys are going and getting help, and their worlds are so much better. Their jobs are better. Their marriage is better. Their relationship with their kids is better, right? Because it's hard to read the label on the jar when you're sitting inside. Yes.
I love the way you speak and all these, like, everything's a one-liner. And a good metaphor. And what you just talked about, I want to touch on a little bit, even maybe a little bit deeper, is that it is some of the intangibles that people are not realizing when they bring this type of thing into the workplace. Is like, yes, happier employees are going to do better in the workplace. And a lot of times our happiness depends on how we feel about ourselves and how things are going in those personal relationships. And And it sounds like that's something that you get on a regular basis, feedback wise too, is like, yes, these resources need to be there for supporting our employees. And I commonly hear from people after like a yes and workshop that they're like, oh, I was yeah butting on myself, or I've been yeah butting on my kid, or yeah butting on my spouse or whatever. And it's those at home fires that get relit that ultimately send them back off into their workday feeling better. Like, you see that probably just as often as I do, is like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it works both ways, right? If you're
Yeah.
having a crappy day at work and you decide to be happy and come home and focus on the positive, then your home life's happy.
Yeah.
Or you're at home and you have a crappy job, you know what? I'm going to make the best of it. And, some people will come up to me and say, what do I do? And, through coaching and talking to them afterwards, if it's not, it's it's harder for a company to change their ways and their culture than it is for an individual, right? And at
Sure.
some points, if it's not working out, get an exit strategy, right? Continue to do the best you can at your job, but find out who you are, what makes you happy, what drives you, and start looking on the side. And, some organizations will like, oh, I don't want you to take people away from me. And I tell them, I go, if you have a non-happy person, why? Why
Yeah.
not help them? And I've worked with companies and had them help their employees. You know what? It doesn't seem like it's a good fit for you. How can we help you, support you to get you to another organization or something you really love to do? Right. So
Yeah.
it's for both people. But at times, if it's not the right fit, get out. Like, life is too short. I figured this out
Totally.
way too late in life.
Oh my gosh. Samesies.
Right? I mean, everybody, we've all had great jobs, we've all had crappy jobs, but for the last 3 years, yes, I have bad days. I have days I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, am I really making a difference in the world? But I
Yeah.
look back over 3 years and I've never been happier.
Oh, that's so good.
I'm
So for
helping them.
those of you listening that are in a work environment where there's challenges, whether you're a leadership in that space, or that you can immediately make the decision, or you work somewhere and you want to suggest this all comes down to, like, when I worked in corporate, it's all about the recruitment and retention strategies. Like, we would hire people, try to position like the information about what it's going to be like to work here based off of this information. And then it may not be the exact right fit either. Maybe it was not the right role within the organization, and maybe they needed to switch to a different position to maximize their skills and to find that flow. Or it is not a good fit, or some people that have just been there forever and they don't want to change and evolve with more modern times. But I feel like for a lot of companies, this is a huge retention strategy, like retaining your best people, giving them the best chance possible to be happy and engaged. And then either way, if we're doing a good service to it, but it's like companies almost can't afford not to do things like this, is ultimately what I'm saying. Like, it's a huge missed
Absolutely.
opportunity to not invest in the human beings that run their businesses.
Yeah. Like, we need to put people before profits.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of companies, it's the old school, it's shareholders. We got to drive revenue. We got to make more money. We got to make more money. But the statistics are now two stats. Companies who lose an employee, it's anywhere from 150 to 300% of that person's salary to replace them, whether
Oh,
they're
interesting.
an entry level worker or a CEO or a C-suite. So,
Mhm.
I mean, you think about that, right? If you have to get rid of somebody, it's a bad apple. They're affecting other people. By the time you get rid of that person and then recruit and interview and onboard, you hope they're the right fit. I mean, that's a lot of money lost.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, another stat that they did research during COVID and coming out of COVID, people now are more willing to forego a $10,000 raise if they feel like their voice is heard, if they feel like they have meaning, and
Mm.
a pat on the back. That goes
Yeah.
such a long ways,
Oh,
right?
totally.
And
Yeah.
if we do put people first, yeah, it's counterintuitive to what we know, but on the opposite side, the profit is so much more because you're not having to replace people. You're
Yeah.
building within, and when you have that culture, that person is going to go, you know what? I love my company. I don't hate my company. And they're going to find people for you, friends of theirs that are going to love working at that company. And so
Yeah.
your costs go down as well.
Totally. Man, it totally makes sense to me. I'm not in charge of every company. Sometimes it's the companies that are like the weird, the most challenging conversations around these types of things. And then I'm like, oh, you guys don't
Yeah.
realize what's happening. And I just bless it and I got to move on with my day. But yeah, it's so critical. I want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about your speaking side of life. Like you are a really great speaker. I thoroughly enjoyed watching your TEDx. I would love to hear what drew you to the speaker space. What I don't know. I guess I want to kind of leave that open-ended because I know a lot of the people that listen to this podcast and that are in my general space right now are people who are really wanting to understand how to use their stories and their teachable tools and make an impact for the better in the world. And speaking is a really great way to do that. So talk to us about like your TEDx experience, how, like what, or speaking in general, where is that fall into your line of life and business growth?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I guess ever since I was a kid, in grade school and stuff, we'd have to get up and do talks, and we would have a student week of prayer. And so I remember when I was 13, I gave my first talk, and it was about Wayne Gretzky and what a hero he was of mine. And I kind of relate. I don't remember that, but I just remember the rush of having people listening to you and see the lights go off. The light bulbs, bing. And
Mhm.
and so, doing stand up, I always want to do that. I took a chance, and I got to the point where, I was working with folks like Robin Williams and Norm Macdonald. But
Mhm.
I also saw the dark side of stand up comedy, and I now know why people fail and get addicted to drugs and alcohol, because when you drink, it takes away the pain, right? It,
Yeah.
it numbs you. But I found that doing what we do now, meditation, breathing, volunteering, service, it it not only takes away the sadness, but it actually brings you joy, and it doesn't numb you down. And so when I had the opportunity, when I was doing stand up, somebody came up to me after a show and said, "Hey, do you do corporate events?" And I lied. Absolutely. He said,
Nice.
I said, "Well, what kind of budget do you have?" And he said, "Well, we'd be happy to give you $1,000 if you came and talked to us for 15 minutes."
Mm.
And right there, I was like, "Okay, I just spent 45 minutes headlining for $200. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm in." And so I made sure I booked the speaking engagement out for about 3 weeks, so I could write one.
Mhm.
But it's just so much better for me, and I get such a charge, and you probably do, right? When you walk off the stage, you've got that high, and there's people talking, and the energy is flowing, and everything is wonderful. And then for me, I always get the speaker hangover. So I've learned now, when I do a keynote, I take the next day off because I'm no good. I'm spent.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just that thing of service, and I learned that from my parents. My dad finished medical school and decided to be a medical missionary doctor for 6 years. And
Mm.
so I was actually born in Hong Kong.
Mm.
And you've got all the student debt, and here you are going to be a missionary volunteer. And so I've always had that ingrained, and I really, thank my parents for that. But just, building it, and if you're listening and you're wanting to get into speaking, Megan does a great job in helping people craft their stories, and stories are so important. And I might
Mhm.
not be the most eloquent speaker out there, but the stories are really sticky, right? If you
Mhm.
share a story with a lesson, people will come back. I I tell the story. I told it yesterday at a speaking engagement about Robin Williams, and when he came up to me, he said afterwards, he said, "Hey, number one, Greg, you're funny," which was awesome. When your hero goes, "You're funny," and he said, "Number two, keep doing what you're doing, because you'll never know the difference you make in someone else's life."
Yeah.
About 3 years after that, I was doing a show. It was my own show, a comedy show in a hotel lobby bar. And about 5 minutes in, there was probably about 30 people, and it was noisy, and the TVs were on. It wasn't the best venue for a comedy, but we were having fun. And father and son walked in. 5 minutes late, they sat in the front row, put their feet on my stage. I was like, "Oh," and they're sitting like this with their arms crossed, like, "Make me laugh, funny man." Uh,
Uh-huh.
and I remember what Robin Williams had said. He said, "Hey, make people laugh. You'll never know the difference." And so I made it my mission that night to make them laugh. So I was telling stories, talking to them, and their demeanor turned by the end of the show, right? They were getting into laughter and they're having a good time. And so afterwards, I went up and just wanted to say hi to them, thank them for coming to the show. And I said, how did you hear about the show? And the dad said, well, we've been walking by your show for the last 8 weeks every Thursday night, but we're so tired, we just have dinner and fall into bed and go to sleep. And I thought that was kind of odd, staying in a hotel for 8 weeks. I said, are you moving here, or, what's going on? And he said, well, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer 8 weeks ago. And so she's in the hospital across the street. And so my son and I, every day we go and take care of her, make sure she's okay, take her to appointments. He said, at the end of the day, we're just so tired. We just have dinner and go to bed. And so I asked what I thought was the next logical question. And I looked at the son. I said, how's mom doing? And he started to cry. And he said, mom died this morning. So here's 3 dudes crying in a hotel lobby bar after a comedy show and just hugging each other. I said, and when somebody goes through something like that, I used to not know what to say, and I still don't. But what I say when I hear stuff like that is like, I'm sorry. I'm here for you. I'm sorry. Like, we don't have to know what to say, right? And so I said that. I'm like, I am so sorry. And we're crying. And finally the dad got it together. And this is when I understood what Robin Williams said to me. The dad said, thank you so much for making us laugh. It's the first time we felt normal in 8 weeks. And that right there was an epiphany. I'm like, I got to do this more. I got to have more conversations with people, because they changed my life, and I hope I changed theirs, right? I'll never see them again. But for that 45 minutes of that comedy show, they were not thinking about mom and his wife.
Yeah.
That's what keeps me going, right? Service and telling stories. So if you have a story that you want to share and get out there with a lesson, talk to Megan. She's great at helping people do that. But it'll change your life. And right, that's how I get joy. That's how I stay happy, is going back and remembering these things. And it's powerful.
It really is. And just to even expand upon like what it means to be in service of it, right? Is like, it's a lot of times, I find a mix between 2 different dynamics of people who come to me and they want to speak. And if someone doesn't mention service or how they want to share with other people or help others within the first few minutes, I'm like, okay, this is not my person. Because some if they're not in that service space, or they're doing it for themselves, it means a lot of times that the processing hasn't happened, and they're still too stuck inside themselves to really recognize how much this is a gift we're giving to other people when we speak. And it's not about us, right? And keeping in mind what people, like, a lot of times, like, the scariest things for us to share, or like the biggest trials we've gone through, and those things that might get us a catch in our throat, which I know during your TEDx, I'm going to make sure the link is in there. So if you guys are listening, please look in the show notes and jump in and watch his TEDx, because it's so good. There's like a very slight catch that gets in your throat, right? Because it's scary to share. And without fail, it's those moments that really are what touches someone. And we don't know who and what the circumstance is until maybe they share. And I hear that from my speaking clients time and time again, that they're like, oh my gosh, it was that one thing that I was like so scared to share, but I felt like I really needed to. And then when they did, that's the thing. That's where that fear, it's like whatever the powers that be are trying to keep us from doing that. Those are those tethers that are the gift to connect our hearts with other people and be part of that healing process.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. I love all of this. And so kind of as we are on the home stretch, I want to pull a couple of things back together here. One of the things that you mentioned, I mean, we've talked a little bit about, like, in general, just being a man who emotes, and that's cool. Like, I know that I've run across some people who feel like if they cry, they're like, they think it's a weakness, when really I think it's completely the opposite. I feel like people who are becoming in touch with their emotions and are, processing through hard things and changing the dynamic of what we have thought is normal protocol is really very strong. So I want you to tell us a little bit about the organization that are you involved with, the Men in the Middle group? Are you Tell us what is that? How do people
Yeah.
get, like, what does it do? What do you love about it? Tell us more.
Yeah, no, well, after Rachel's dad's passing, I didn't know what to do, right? And it's so great now that I know what to do and how to share. And so I joined a group here in Walla Walla called Reach Out Walla Walla, a support group and an awareness group for people that are struggling with mental health, or have had loved ones pass by suicide. And out of that, it just kind of boiled up. And men, we don't talk a lot. Women are so great at doing this. And I know a lot of men out there that are listening going, yeah, my wife talks too much. um, but as guys, we'll get together and talk about sports. And so we decided to have a group. It's non-political, it's non-religious, and we don't even really promote the mental health. It's just bonding with guys, doing things together, standing shoulder to shoulder, building relationships and building trust to where we can have these conversations. And so we started this group called Men in the Middle. It's on Facebook, Men in the Middle Walla Walla. Anybody can join. We're working on getting more online activities, like even a group Zoom once a month or whatnot, so other people can join. But I've had people from other cities say, "How do I start this?" And basically, it's just a group of guys that get together. We have about 25 or 30 here in Walla Walla. We've gone and done service at the Children's Museum here in town, where we cleaned up the yard, done some painting. Every fourth Sunday, we gather together and go down to the Christian Aid Center and cook and serve meals to the homeless. Anywhere 50 to 150 people show up. We have a beer night. We do stand-up comedy. We're going to go to hockey games. It's just dudes hanging out, right? Without our kids, without our wives. And that has opened up so many conversations about mental health or marriage or finances, right? And now I've got 25 guys that I can reach out to, and these guys as well too, right? If stuff's going sideways with my marriage, I can what I do, kids, money, jobs, whatever. And the cool thing is we've had so many great relationships out of there. Two guys have gone into rehab because they found out that they were drinking too much and their marriages were falling apart. And I said, well, hey, there's the other guy in the group who's been sober for 25 years. Go talk to him.
Oh, wow.
So we're just connecting each other. I've had conversations with guys who are now retired, and their thing is service. And they've had daughters that are now married and fully grown. And I'm like, I'm struggling this with my daughter. What do I do? Right. And so it's friendly advice, but there's so much power in being vulnerable. And I've really learned that from watching Brene Brown, right? Be vulnerable and connect. And so it's just a great group. So, if anybody out there is listening and they want to know what we do, the specifics, I'm more than happy to have a conversation because we need more of it. It's a book club for dudes.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Book club for dudes. It's so good. Yeah, right. Hey, even better if they don't want to be reading. It's so cool. It sounds like there's a lot of it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of accountability. Like self-reflection is not easy. Being vulnerable, as you said. And I know I love doing this podcast mostly because it helps me with my own personal development to continue to have like cool people come on and expand my mind around things. But like this is something that you get to actively choose. You are actively choosing to be aware of your thoughts, what's going on in your mind, putting it to the test every single day. I mean, is there ever a day that I guess sometimes we might get a pass for a tiny short window, but I think it could be easier said than done is what I'm saying. So like when you are feeling, now that you know all these tools that and you can't unknow them, what inspires you to really keep activating it in your own life, like really living what you teach?
Well, I think just being authentic, right? If I'm not doing what I preach, then what value is there? And you said you think your point was saying, it's really tough to be vulnerable and do that. And I was there 5 years ago. But I'm not anymore, right? I mean, even through COVID night, I'll see a buddy and I'm like, hey man, I love you. I would never have said that before, right? I'm like, I'm a man. Why would I say that? But when people understand that everybody's going through the same shit, right? We all think, oh, well, that person's Greg's got it together. Megan's got it together. No, we don't.
Right.
We know the
Exactly.
strategies to get back to where we need to be. And not every day is going to be happy,
Yeah.
but you and I both have the tools like, okay, the day's gone sideways or our week's gone sideways. How do we get back? And it's just, to me, it fuels me when I hear other guys, other gals saying, hey, I'm doing this. All the time, and another thing, you and I are both into humor. I started a Facebook page called the Humor Lab.
Mhm.
There may or may not have been a bottle or two of wine involved. But I was like, okay, we're going into a shutdown. How am I going to make people laugh? So I started this page called the Humor Lab. It's PG-13. There's no politics. And it's just it's a collection of everybody's style of humor, right? There's dad jokes, there's memes, there's videos, whatever. And so I put this group together and sent it out to 20 of my friends. It was a Tuesday night. I woke up the next morning. There was 150 people in this group that had started posting stuff. And, 2.5 years later, we have 40,000 people from around the world.
Whoa.
Are showing and sharing their sense of humor. And I get texts and messages all the time. You know what? I was having a bad day. I went home. I checked out the Humor Lab and I added to it. And it's, again, it's not me. It's the message, right? It's a collection of everybody's sense of humor. And it's just, and what I do, it just, it fires me up every day. Every day there's somebody every day I wake up, I'm like, who am I going to help today to laugh or smile or go to therapy? And
Yeah.
it drives me.
You're so cool. You're so cool.
Mom.
I think you're so cool. I just wish more. Yeah, I just want more people to feel this way. It's any of you out there listening and you're in a rut or you've been whatever, like share these tools and keep activating them. And it can be challenging. And yet it's so worth it when you can see that it works. It does take effort. And then being able to bring a little spark of goodness into someone else's life, because we don't ever know what's happening with other people. Yeah, that's 100%. This has been so delightful. I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
It's a lot of fun.
You're really amazing. So everyone, thank you for tuning in as well. Make sure you check out all the links. We're dropping all sorts of goodies in the show notes so that you can connect with Greg. If you have upcoming work events or different things or ongoing programming, I'm sure you do both of those things, whether it's like a leadership retreat or maybe something that could be on a recurring basis. I would highly recommend that you talk to the powers that be in your workspace and consider bringing WorkHappy into your workspace so that you can all be happier, thriving individuals and succeed and win all the prizes as the company functions. Why not? Really pull out all the stops. But yeah, it's been a real joy to share some space here with you. And I wish you nothing but continued happiness in the process. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Megan. And it's good to be surrounded by people like you who are doing the same thing. And it's just, it's amazing to have people in your life that, like, I know if I have a really sideways day, I can, Megan, help me out, right?
Yeah, 100%.
We're better together. And the more we talk about our feelings, the more we realize that we're all in the same boat together. We're all struggling at times. And I just really appreciate you having me on and doing what you do and helping people find their stories, helping people. Yes. And all the stuff that you're doing, like you said, we're working on we're heading toward the same target from different lanes. And so it's great to be involved and have friends like you. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Likewise. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the I Hardly Know Her podcast, brought to you by Improv Team Culture and Ovation Speaker Experience. To be a force for positive change in this world, we can use our voices in a productive way. Excellent communication skills are paramount when we are faced with challenging and transformative topics. For more information on leadership communication skills and speaker coaching for professionals, visit us at ovationexperience.com.